"You're a thief." The accusation echoed through the marble halls of the mansion. Every conversation stopped. Every eye turned. And standing in the middle of the room was a woman who looked like she wished the floor would open beneath her feet. Her name was Clara Simmons, a housemaid, a single mother, and at that moment, the most humiliated person in the room. But what nobody knew was that less than 5 minutes later, a 3-year-old little girl would walk into that same room and say 4 words that would change everything. 4 words. That's all it took. 4 words that exposed a lie. 4 words that made a billionaire break down in tears. And 4 words that would forever alter the lives of everyone standing there. Stay with me, because this story isn't just about wealth. It isn't just about betrayal. It's about dignity. It's about truth. And it's about how sometimes the smallest voice in the room carries the greatest power. Before we begin, I want to know where you're watching from today. Drop your city and country in the comments below. I love seeing how far these stories travel around the world. Now get comfortable, because what you're about to hear is one of the most emotional stories I've ever shared. And it begins with a woman who spent her entire life being underestimated. Her name was Clara Simmons. And at 31 years old, she'd already survived more heartbreak than most people face in a lifetime. Clara grew up in a small rural town in Tennessee. The kind of town where everyone knew everyone. The kind of place where dreams often seemed much farther away than the next county line. She never knew her father, and she lost her mother before she was old enough to understand what loss really meant. The person who raised her was her grandmother, a tough woman named Evelyn. Evelyn worked double shifts at a textile factory for nearly 30 years. Her hands were rough. Her back constantly ached. But somehow she always found enough strength to put food on the table. Some nights, dinner was nothing more than canned soup and crackers. Other nights, it was whatever Evelyn could stretch from the week's paycheck. Yet Clara never heard her grandmother complain. Not once. Instead, Evelyn would smile and tell her the same thing every night. "Money comes and goes, baby. But character stays." Those words became Clara's compass. Whenever life became difficult, she remembered them. And life became difficult often. She studied hard in school, graduated near the top of her class, earned a partial scholarship to nursing school. For the first time, it seemed her future might finally be changing. She dreamed of becoming a nurse. She wanted to help people. She wanted to give others the care her family could never afford. But life had different plans. Halfway through her second year of college, Evelyn became sick. Very sick. The kind of sickness that arrives quietly. The kind that starts with fatigue and small doctor visits, then suddenly becomes hospital rooms, medical bills, specialists, treatments, and fear. Lots of fear. Clara spent every spare moment beside her grandmother's hospital bed. She tried balancing school and caregiving. For a while, she managed, until she couldn't. Eventually, she faced an impossible choice. Finish school, or take care of the woman who had sacrificed everything for her. For Clara, it wasn't really a choice at all. She dropped out, took 2 jobs, and devoted herself to Evelyn's care. For nearly 18 months, she fought alongside her grandmother. But some battles aren't meant to be won. On a rainy Thursday morning, Evelyn passed away. Clara was holding her hand when it happened. Her final words were simple: "Stay kind." Then she was gone. And suddenly Clara was alone. Completely alone. For a while, grief swallowed everything. The apartment felt empty. The silence felt unbearable. And the future felt impossible. Then, just when she thought life couldn't become more complicated, she discovered she was pregnant. The father? A man she'd been dating for nearly 2 years. A man who had promised her forever. At least until forever became inconvenient. The moment he learned about the pregnancy, he disappeared. No calls. No messages. No explanation. Just gone. Leaving Clara to face motherhood entirely on her own. She cried for days. Not because she was afraid of raising a child, but because she worried she would fail. She worried her baby would grow up feeling abandoned. The same way she had. Yet the moment she held her daughter for the first time, everything changed. The tiny girl wrapped her fingers around Clara's hand. And somehow, all the fear became determination. Her name was Lily. And from that day forward, Clara lived for one purpose: giving Lily a better life, even if it meant sacrificing her own dreams. Years passed. Clara worked wherever she could. Restaurants, hotels, cleaning companies, night shifts, weekend shifts, holiday shifts, anything that paid, anything that kept food on the table. anything that allowed her little girl to smile. Then one day, opportunity knocked. A luxury staffing agency offered her a position working inside one of the most exclusive private residences in the state. The home belonged to billionaire entrepreneur Richard Harrison, a man worth hundreds of millions, a man whose name appeared regularly in magazines and business journals. The pay was better than anything Clara had ever earned. The benefits were excellent, and for the first time in years, she felt hope. Maybe she could finally stop living paycheck to paycheck. Maybe she could start saving for Lily's future. Maybe life was finally turning around. What Clara didn't know was that accepting that job would place her directly in the path of a woman whose jealousy would nearly destroy her life. A woman named Vanessa Brooks, Richard Harrison's fiancée, and the person who would soon point a finger at Clara and call her a thief. For the first few weeks, the job felt almost too good to be true. The Harrison estate sat on nearly 20 acres of perfectly manicured land. There were fountains taller than most houses, gardens that looked like they belonged in magazines, and windows so large they reflected the sunrise like giant mirrors. The first morning Clara arrived, she nearly turned around and went home. Not because she couldn't do the work, but because she felt she didn't belong there. Everything seemed so different from the life she'd always known. The marble floors, the crystal chandeliers, the luxury cars lined up in the driveway. It felt like stepping into another world. Yet Clara reminded herself why she was there. Lily. Everything was for Lily. So she straightened her uniform, took a deep breath, and walked inside. To her surprise, Richard Harrison wasn't what she expected. The billionaire had a reputation for being ruthless in business. The newspapers described him as a shark, a man who built companies and crushed competitors. But in person, he was quiet, reserved, almost lonely. He greeted every employee by name. He thanked people for their work. And unlike many wealthy employers, he never treated the staff as if they were invisible. That mattered to Clara, because she'd spent years being overlooked. Years feeling like she only existed when someone needed something cleaned or carried. Richard made her feel human, and that was something she would never forget. Over time, Clara became one of the most trusted members of the household staff. She was always early, never complained, never cut corners. If a task needed doing, she did it. If someone needed help, she offered it. The other employees respected her almost immediately. Some even became friends. For the first time in years, Clara felt stable. Life wasn't perfect, but it was improving. She could finally afford dance classes for Lily. She could buy groceries without calculating every dollar. And she even started putting money aside each month. Not much, but enough to give her hope. Every evening when she returned home, Lily would run into her arms. "Mama." The little girl would wrap herself around Clara's legs and refuse to let go. Those moments made every exhausting shift worth it. Because no matter how hard life became, Lily always reminded her what mattered most. What Clara didn't realize was that someone inside the mansion had already begun watching her. Someone who didn't like her. Someone who viewed her kindness as a threat. That person was Vanessa Brooks, Richard Harrison's fiancée. Vanessa was beautiful. The kind of beautiful people noticed the moment she entered a room. Perfect hair, perfect clothes, perfect smile, at least on the surface. But beneath that polished appearance lived something much darker. Vanessa cared deeply about appearances, status, image, control. She loved expensive jewelry, luxury vacations, designer handbags, and most of all, she loved being admired. The engagement to Richard had elevated her into a world she had always dreamed about. And she intended to stay there, at any cost. The first time she met Clara, she smiled. But there was something cold behind her eyes. Something calculating. Clara noticed it immediately. Still, she remained polite, professional, respectful, because that was who she was. Weeks turned into months, and little incidents began happening. Small things at first. Vanessa would criticize Clara's work even when there was nothing wrong. She'd complain about folded towels, dust that wasn't there, flowers arranged incorrectly. No matter what Clara did, it was never enough. At first, Clara assumed Vanessa was simply difficult. Some people were. She'd worked for worse. But eventually the criticism became personal. One afternoon, Clara overheard Vanessa speaking to a friend. The women stood near the dining room, while Clara dusted shelves nearby. "I don't understand why Richard likes her so much," Vanessa said. Her friend laughed. "Who?" "That maid." Clara froze. Vanessa continued. "Every time I turn around, He's thanking her for something. Maybe she's just good at her job. Vanessa rolled her eyes. Or maybe she knows exactly how to make people feel sorry for her. The women laughed. Clara kept working, pretending not to hear, pretending those words didn't hurt. But they did, because Clara had never asked anyone to feel sorry for her. She simply worked hard. That was all. From that day forward, Vanessa's behavior grew worse. She constantly searched for reasons to complain. She questioned Clara's honesty, questioned her motives, questioned her character. And though Richard never seemed to notice, the rest of the staff certainly did. They saw how Vanessa treated Clara. They saw the tension, and many quietly sympathized with her. Yet Clara refused to fight back. She remembered her grandmother's words. Stay kind. So she continued doing her job, day after day, week after week, never imagining that Vanessa was slowly building a story in her mind. A story where Clara wasn't a hard-working single mother. A story where Clara wasn't loyal, or honest, or trustworthy. No. In Vanessa's story, Clara was something else entirely. A threat. And people who felt threatened often did dangerous things. Then came the day everything changed. It started like any other morning. The staff was preparing for an extravagant engagement celebration. More than 50 guests were expected that evening. Business leaders, celebrities, politicians, some of the wealthiest people in the state. The mansion buzzed with activity. Caterers moved in and out. Florists delivered arrangements. Musicians rehearsed. Everyone was busy, including Clara. By noon, Vanessa was already stressed. Nothing seemed to satisfy her. The flowers weren't perfect. The seating arrangements weren't perfect. The decorations weren't perfect. And unfortunately for Clara, Vanessa directed most of her frustration toward her. Still, Clara stayed calm. She smiled, finished her work, and focused on getting through the day. But around 3 o'clock that afternoon, a scream shattered the mansion's calm. A scream so loud that people rushed from every direction. Employees froze. Guests stopped talking. Security immediately moved toward the sound. The scream had come from Vanessa's private dressing room. And when Clara arrived with everyone else, she found Vanessa standing in the center of the room. Pale, shaking, furious. One hand covered her mouth. The other pointed toward an empty jewelry box. My necklace, she cried. My diamond necklace is gone. The room fell silent. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The necklace wasn't ordinary jewelry. Everyone knew that. Richard had given it to Vanessa shortly after proposing. It was worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Maybe more. And now it had vanished. Vanessa's eyes scanned the room, looking from face to face, searching, calculating. Then suddenly, her gaze landed on Clara, and a slow smile appeared. A smile that sent a chill down Clara's spine. Because in that moment, Vanessa looked less like a victim, and more like someone who had just found exactly what she was looking for. For a few seconds, nobody said anything. The room stood frozen. The staff, the guests, the security guards. Everyone stared at Vanessa, then at Clara, then back at Vanessa. Clara felt her stomach tighten. Something wasn't right. She couldn't explain it. But something about the look in Vanessa's eyes made her uneasy. Vanessa slowly lowered her hand. My necklace was here less than an hour ago. Her voice trembled, not with sadness, with anger. I left it in this jewelry box while getting ready. The room remained silent. Vanessa looked directly at Clara. And there is only one person who entered this room after I left. Clara's heart dropped. The accusation wasn't spoken yet, but everyone could hear it coming, like distant thunder before a storm. Vanessa, Richard began cautiously, but Vanessa cut him off. No. She folded her arms. I want answers. Her gaze never left Clara. You were cleaning this room earlier, weren't you? Clara swallowed. Yes, ma'am. And you were alone? Yes. Vanessa nodded slowly, almost as if she had expected that answer. And now my necklace is missing. The room became painfully quiet. Clara could feel dozens of eyes on her. She forced herself to remain calm. I didn't take your necklace. Vanessa laughed. A short, sharp laugh. What a surprise. Richard stepped forward. Let's not jump to conclusions. But Vanessa wasn't interested in conclusions. She was interested in blame. Then explain why nobody else was here. I can't explain that, Clara said softly. But I didn't steal anything. Vanessa's expression hardened. That's exactly what a thief would say. The word hit Clara like a slap. Thief. She'd spent her entire life trying to prove she was more than the circumstances she came from, more than the poverty, more than the setbacks. more than the assumptions people made about her. And now, in front of an entire room full of strangers, she was being reduced to one ugly word. Thief. Richard looked uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. Because deep down, he didn't believe Clara was capable of stealing. Not after months of watching her work. Not after seeing how dedicated she was. But the necklace was gone. And the evidence, at least on the surface, wasn't helping her. Vanessa turned toward security. Search her. The words echoed through the room. Clara blinked. What? Search her. Vanessa pointed directly at her. If she's innocent, she has nothing to worry about. Humiliation flooded Clara's face. She felt every pair of eyes on her. Every whisper. Every judgment. Every assumption. She wanted to disappear. Instead, she stood there silently. One of the security guards looked toward Richard, waiting for instructions. Richard hesitated. That hesitation broke Clara's heart more than anything else. Because for the first time, she saw doubt in his eyes. Not certainty. Not trust. Doubt. And doubt was enough. The guard approached her carefully. Miss Simmons. His voice was apologetic. We need to follow procedure. Clara nodded slowly. She had nothing to hide. Nothing. So she raised her arms. The search began. Her pockets. Her work bag. Her jacket. Everything. The room watched. Nobody spoke. Nobody looked away. And when the search ended, the necklace wasn't there. A wave of relief washed through Clara. Surely now this nightmare would end. Surely now everyone would realize Vanessa was wrong. But Vanessa wasn't finished. Not even close. She crossed her arms. Maybe she hid it somewhere else. The room murmured. Clara stared at her in disbelief. Vanessa, enough, Richard said firmly. But Vanessa shook her head. No. Her voice rose. That necklace is worth nearly $500,000. Several guests gasped. $500,000. The number hung in the air. Heavy. Dangerous. Vanessa pointed at Clara again. Do you know how many people would risk everything for that kind of money? Clara felt tears threatening to form. Not because she was guilty. Because she was exhausted. Exhausted from being judged. Exhausted from defending herself. Exhausted from living in a world where some people assumed the worst simply because she didn't have money. Richard stepped between them. That's enough. For the first time, his voice carried real authority. The room fell silent. We don't have proof that Clara took anything. Vanessa's jaw tightened. But we don't have proof she didn't. Richard rubbed his forehead. The tension in the room was unbearable. Then one of the house employees rushed inside. Sir. Everyone turned. The young employee looked nervous. There's something else. Richard frowned. What is it? The employee hesitated. Then spoke. Someone found the jewelry box open almost an hour before Clara cleaned the room. The room erupted into whispers. Vanessa's face changed instantly. Just for a second. A tiny flicker. So fast most people missed it. But Clara saw it. Fear. It vanished almost immediately. Replaced by anger. That proves nothing. Maybe it didn't. But it created doubt. And doubt was dangerous for someone who wanted complete control over the story. Vanessa knew she was losing the room. So she made a decision. A reckless one. She stepped closer to Clara. Close enough that only a few feet separated them. Tell the truth. Clara met her gaze. I am. You're lying. No. You're lying. I didn't take your necklace. The two women stared at each other. One furious. One heartbroken. Then suddenly another voice interrupted. A tiny voice. A child's voice. Mama. Every head turned. Standing in the doorway was 3-year-old Lily. Clara's daughter. The little girl had been coloring in a staff lounge while her mother finished work. One of the employees had brought her over during the commotion. Lily looked confused. Her small eyes moved around the crowded room. Then she noticed the tears in her mother's eyes. Immediately, her expression changed. Children notice things adults often miss. And Lily knew something was wrong. Very wrong. She walked across the room. Tiny shoes tapping against the marble floor. The mansion fell silent. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Lily reached Clara and wrapped her tiny arms around her leg. Mama, why are you sad? Clara's voice broke. I'm okay, sweetheart. But she wasn't. And Lily knew it. The little girl looked around the room again. Her gaze eventually landed on Vanessa. For several seconds, she simply stared. Then her tiny face frowned. As if she suddenly remembered something. Something important. Something everyone else had missed. And what happened next would stop the room cold. The room was completely silent. Even the security guards stood motionless. Lily looked up at Vanessa, then at her mother. then back at Vanessa again. Her little forehead wrinkled, as if she were trying to remember something. Richard watched curiously. Vanessa looked annoyed. The last thing she wanted right now was a child interrupting her moment. "Someone take her out of here," Vanessa snapped. But before anyone could move, Lily spoke. Softly, innocently, the way only a 3-year-old can. "The shiny lady." Nobody understood what she meant. The room exchanged confused looks. "The shiny lady?" Richard asked gently. Lily nodded. "Yes." Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Richard, please." But Richard wasn't listening anymore. He crouched down so he could look Lily in the eyes. "What about the shiny lady, sweetheart?" Lily pointed. Directly at Vanessa. The room froze. Vanessa's expression tightened. "What are you talking about?" she asked sharply. Lily didn't answer immediately. She looked nervous. Children often become quiet when surrounded by strangers. So Clara knelt beside her. "It's okay, baby." Lily nodded, then looked back at Richard, and said the words that changed everything. She hid the sparkles. Silence. Complete silence. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Richard blinked. "What did you say?" Lily pointed at Vanessa again. "She hid the sparkles." Vanessa laughed. A forced laugh. A nervous laugh. "She's 3 years old." Nobody laughed with her, because something about the little girl's confidence felt different. Children lie sometimes, but they rarely lie convincingly. And Lily wasn't trying to convince anyone. She was simply telling what she believed was true. Richard looked carefully at her. "What sparkles?" Richard asked. "The shiny necklace." Lily responded. The room erupted into whispers. Vanessa's face lost color. Only slightly, but enough for people to notice. Clara stared at her daughter, confused. "Lily, sweetheart, what necklace?" The little girl looked surprised, as though the answer were obvious. "The one the shiny lady put in the secret box." Every conversation stopped instantly. "A secret box?" Vanessa's eyes widened. For the first time all afternoon, genuine panic flashed across her face. Richard noticed. So did everyone else. He slowly stood. "Lily." His voice remained calm. "Can you tell me exactly what you saw?" The little girl nodded. Children often remember details adults overlook, especially when they aren't aware something important is happening. Lily pointed toward the hallway. "I was drawing." Clara suddenly remembered. Earlier that afternoon, Lily had been coloring near one of the sitting rooms while Clara worked. The hallway connected to Vanessa's dressing suite. At the time, nobody thought anything of it. Now it suddenly mattered. "A butterfly picture," Lily continued proudly. "I made a butterfly." Richard smiled softly. "That's wonderful," he said. Then he asked, "And while you were drawing?" Lily pointed at Vanessa again. The shiny lady came. Vanessa folded her arms. "This is ridiculous." But nobody was paying attention to her anymore. The room was focused entirely on Lily. The little girl continued. She looked around. Richard's expression darkened. "And then?" Richard asked. "Then she put the sparkles away." Lily continued. "Away where?" Richard asked. Lily pointed toward the far side of the dressing room. A large white cabinet stood against the wall. The same cabinet nobody had paid attention to all afternoon. The same cabinet Vanessa had specifically told staff not to touch. Several people looked toward it. Vanessa immediately stepped forward. "This is absurd." But her voice cracked. Just slightly. And that tiny crack told everyone something important. She was scared. Very scared. Richard noticed too. Slowly, he turned toward the cabinet. "Open it." Vanessa's face turned pale. "Richard," she called nervously. "Open it." Richard responded to her a little furiously. The room had changed. Moments ago, Clara had been the suspect. Now every eye was on Vanessa. The fiancée swallowed hard. "It's a child's imagination," Vanessa said. "Then you have nothing to worry about." Richard responded. Vanessa didn't move. That was all Richard needed. He nodded toward security. "Open it." The guard stepped forward. Vanessa suddenly grabbed his arm. "No." The room gasped. That single word revealed more than she intended. The guard looked at Richard. Richard's jaw tightened. "Move aside, Vanessa." For a moment, nobody moved. Then Vanessa slowly released the guard. The security officer opened the cabinet. Inside were shelves filled with decorative boxes. Nothing unusual, at first. Then one of the guards noticed something. A small velvet pouch pushed behind a stack of linens. Almost hidden. The room held its breath. The guard reached inside, pulled it out, opened it, and immediately froze. Inside the pouch was Vanessa's missing diamond necklace. The room exploded. Gasps. Whispers. Shock. Disbelief. The necklace had been there the entire time. Vanessa staggered backward, her face completely drained of color. No, she whispered. No, that's impossible. But nobody believed her. Not anymore. The evidence was sitting right there. Richard slowly took the necklace from the guard. His hands trembled. Not because of the jewelry. Because of what it meant. He turned toward Clara, the woman who had just been humiliated in front of dozens of people. The woman who had been called a thief. The woman who had nearly lost everything. And she had been innocent all along. Tears filled Clara's eyes. Not tears of victory. Tears of relief. Because for a few terrifying moments, she thought her life was over. She thought she would lose her job, her reputation, her ability to provide for Lily. All because someone had decided to blame her. Richard looked at Vanessa. His expression was unlike anything anyone had ever seen before. There was no anger. Not yet. What appeared on his face was something much worse. Disappointment. The kind of disappointment that comes when trust dies. Slowly. Irreversibly. And Vanessa knew it. Because at that moment, she realized the truth wasn't finished coming out. Not even close. And what security would discover next would reveal that the missing necklace had been only the beginning. The room felt smaller now. Heavier. The whispers had stopped. Nobody wanted to be the first person to speak. Because everyone understood what had just happened. An innocent woman had been accused. Humiliated. Nearly destroyed. And the person responsible was standing right in front of them. Vanessa Brooks. Richard continued staring at the necklace in his hand. The diamonds sparkled beneath the chandelier lights. Just minutes ago, this necklace had supposedly been stolen. Now it sat exactly where Lily said it would be. Hidden. Not stolen. Hidden. And that changed everything. Vanessa tried to recover. Tried to regain control. There has to be some explanation. Her voice shook. I didn't put it there. Nobody answered. Even her own friends looked uncertain. One of them quietly stepped away. Then another. People who stand beside you during success often disappear when the truth arrives. Richard slowly turned toward security. I want every camera reviewed. Vanessa's eyes widened. Every camera. Not some cameras. Every camera. The mansion had an extensive security system. Hallways. Entrances. Exterior grounds. Nearly every common area was monitored. At the time, nobody thought much of it. Now it was about to become very important. One of the guards nodded. Right away, sir. Vanessa immediately stepped forward. Richard, that's unnecessary. Richard looked at her. For the first time all afternoon, there was ice in his voice. Unnecessary. Vanessa swallowed. You found the necklace. Exactly. His eyes never left hers. So now I want to know how it got there. The room became silent again. Because everyone understood what Richard was really saying. He already knew. He just wanted proof. Absolute proof. The kind nobody could argue with. Vanessa took a step back. And for the first time, fear completely replaced confidence. An hour later, everyone gathered inside the mansion's private media room. The security team had reviewed footage from multiple cameras. Clara sat quietly in the corner with Lily asleep in her lap. She felt emotionally exhausted. The events of the afternoon still didn't feel real. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard Vanessa calling her a thief. Every time she thought about it, her chest tightened. Across the room, Richard stood beside the large monitor. His face was unreadable. Vanessa sat several feet away, silent, pale, avoiding eye contact. The head of security finally entered. The room immediately grew still. We found something. Nobody breathed. The guard loaded the footage onto the screen. A hallway appeared, time-stamped approximately 45 minutes before the accusation. Everyone watched. Vanessa appeared on screen. She looked around carefully, then entered her dressing room. Nothing unusual. At first. A few moments later, she emerged carrying something small. Something wrapped in fabric. The necklace pouch. Several guests gasped. Vanessa closed her eyes. The footage continued. She walked directly to the cabinet Lily had pointed to. Opened it. Placed the pouch inside. Then closed the cabinet and left. The video ended. Silence. Absolute silence. No explanations remained. No misunderstandings. No confusion. The footage showed everything. Vanessa had hidden the necklace herself. The room erupted. People whispered furiously. Several guests stood up. Others shook their heads in disbelief. One woman muttered, "Oh my God." Richard didn't move. Didn't speak. Didn't blink. He simply stared at the frozen image on the screen. The woman he planned to marry. The woman he trusted. The woman he intended to spend his future with. had deliberately framed an innocent person. Not only that, she had chosen someone vulnerable, someone who couldn't easily defend herself, someone whose entire livelihood depended on that job. Clara. Finally, Richard spoke. Why? The room fell silent instantly. Vanessa looked down. Richard repeated the question. Why? His voice cracked slightly. Not from anger. From hurt. Vanessa remained quiet. Richard stepped closer. Why would you do this? For several seconds, nobody moved. Then Vanessa laughed. Not a happy laugh. A broken one. And when she finally looked up, tears were running down her face. You really want to know? Richard said nothing. Vanessa wiped her eyes. You always noticed her. The room frowned. Richard looked confused. What? You thanked her. Vanessa's voice grew louder. You respected her. Nobody understood where this was going. Vanessa pointed toward Clara. Every time she walked into a room, you smiled. Richard stared in disbelief. Vanessa, you asked about her daughter. You cared when her grandmother died. You remembered her birthday. The room slowly began understanding. This wasn't about a necklace. This wasn't about theft. This wasn't about money. This was jealousy. Pure jealousy. Vanessa laughed bitterly. You never looked at me the way you looked at her. Richard's expression hardened. Because she earned respect. The words hit like a hammer. Vanessa froze. So that's it? No. Richard shook his head. That's the problem. His voice became stronger. You saw kindness and turned it into suspicion. You saw honesty and turned it into a threat. You saw a hard-working mother trying to survive. He pointed toward Clara. And you tried to destroy her. Tears streamed down Vanessa's face. But nobody felt sympathy anymore. Not after what she had done. Not after seeing Clara's pain. Then something unexpected happened. Richard walked toward Clara. The room watched. He stopped directly in front of her. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Richard did something nobody expected. Something that shocked every person in the mansion. He lowered his head and apologized. Not a quick apology. Not a casual apology. A real one. Clara. His voice broke. I'm sorry. Tears filled Clara's eyes instantly. Richard continued. I should have trusted you immediately. The billionaire's shoulders trembled. I failed you. Nobody in the room had ever seen Richard Harrison cry. But now tears rolled down his face. Not because of a necklace. Not because of money. Because he realized how close he came to allowing an innocent woman to be destroyed. And because the person responsible was someone he loved. Or thought he loved. Clara couldn't speak. For months, she'd worked inside this mansion. Given everything she had. And for one horrible afternoon, it almost vanished. Because of a lie. Richard looked at Lily sleeping peacefully in her mother's arms. The little girl who had saved her mother. The little girl who simply told the truth. Then he smiled through tears. And quietly said, she's the bravest person in this room. Nobody disagreed. Because without Lily, the truth might never have been discovered. But the biggest surprise of all was still waiting. Because the next morning, Richard Harrison would make a decision that would completely change Clara and Lily's future forever. The next morning, Clara almost didn't go to work. She barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she relived the previous day. The accusation, the humiliation, the whispers, the disbelief, and then Lily's tiny voice cutting through it all. By sunrise, Clara felt emotionally drained. Part of her wanted to stay home, to avoid the mansion, to avoid the stairs, to avoid reliving the nightmare. But bills didn't stop because life was difficult. Responsibilities didn't disappear because your heart was hurting. So she got dressed, prepared Lily for daycare, and drove to the Harrison estate. What she didn't know was that Richard Harrison had spent the entire night awake. The billionaire sat alone in his office long after everyone left. The engagement was over. Vanessa was gone. The wedding had been canceled. The future he thought he was building no longer existed. Yet none of that was what kept him awake. What haunted him was Clara's face. The moment security searched her belongings. The moment she stood there alone. The moment he hesitated. Because that hesitation nearly cost an innocent woman everything. And Richard couldn't forgive himself for it. Not yet. When Clara arrived at the mansion that morning, something felt different. Several staff members greeted her warmly. Others smiled. A few even hugged her. Word had spread quickly. Everyone now knew the truth. Everyone knew she had been innocent. Yet despite the support, Clara still felt uncomfortable. She simply wanted to do her job and move on. As she entered the main hallway, one of the security guards approached her. Mr. Harrison would like to see you. Clara's stomach tightened. Immediately. She wasn't sure why. Maybe because after everything that happened, she expected bad news. Maybe because people like her rarely received life-changing opportunities. Only life-changing problems. The guard led her toward Richard's office. The same office she had only entered twice before. Each step felt heavier than the last. When she finally reached the door, she knocked softly. "Come in." Richard's voice sounded calm. Clara entered and immediately noticed something unusual. There were documents spread across his desk. Several folders, legal papers, and beside them sat a small stuffed butterfly. A butterfly, just like the one Lily had been drawing. Richard smiled. "Please sit." Clara obeyed, unsure what was happening. For a few moments, neither spoke. Then Richard took a deep breath. "How is Lily?" The question surprised her. "She's good." Richard nodded. "Good." His eyes drifted briefly toward the butterfly, then back to Clara. "I owe your daughter more than I'll ever be able to repay." Clara smiled faintly. "She just told the truth." "Exactly." Richard leaned back. "And that's rarer than it should be." For a moment, silence filled the office. Then Richard opened one of the folders. "Clara, how long have you worked since leaving nursing school?" The question caught her off guard. She blinked. "Nursing school?" Richard nodded. She hadn't mentioned it often. A few employees knew. Apparently Richard did too. "I left almost 7 years ago." Richard looked down. "Because of your grandmother." Clara's eyes widened. "How did you know that?" Richard smiled sadly. "People tell me I'm good at business." He paused. "But I've always been more interested in people." For a second, Clara couldn't speak. Because nobody had ever paid that much attention. Nobody except her grandmother. Richard slowly slid a folder across the desk. "Open it." Confused, Clara did. The moment she looked inside, her breath caught. Her hands began shaking, then shaking harder. Tears instantly filled her eyes. Because inside was a tuition agreement. A full educational sponsorship. For nursing school. Every expense covered. Tuition. Books. Housing assistance. Transportation. Everything. Clara stared at the pages, unable to process what she was seeing. "Richard." Her voice cracked. "I don't understand." He smiled. "You once gave up your future to care for someone you loved." Tears rolled down Clara's cheeks. Richard continued. "I think it's time you got that future back." The room became blurry through her tears. For years she had buried that dream. Locked it away. Convinced herself it would never happen. Life had moved on. Dreams were expensive. Reality was not. Yet here it was. Sitting right in front of her. Impossible. Unbelievable. Real. But that's not all. Clara looked up. Richard opened another folder. "What Lily did yesterday saved more than your job." He smiled. She reminded an entire room of adults what honesty looks like. Inside the second folder was something even more shocking. A trust fund, established in Lily's name, with enough money to pay for her future education, college, training, whatever path she chose. Clara covered her mouth, unable to stop crying. "No." Richard nodded. "Yes. I can't accept this." "You can." His voice was firm. "You deserve it." Clara shook her head. "No, Richard. I was just doing my job. And Vanessa was abusing her position." Richard leaned forward. "Those are not the same thing." The room fell silent. Then Richard added something Clara would remember for the rest of her life. "Characters should be rewarded." The words sounded strangely familiar. Suddenly Clara heard her grandmother's voice. "Money comes and goes, baby. But character stays." And for the first time in years, she felt like Evelyn was somehow there with her. Weeks passed, then months. Life slowly transformed. Vanessa disappeared from the public eye. The scandal spread quickly among the social circles she once valued. Her reputation never recovered. But Clara didn't celebrate that. She wasn't that kind of person. Instead, she focused on building her future. She returned to school, studied harder than ever, worked part-time, raised Lily, and every step forward felt like reclaiming a piece of the life she thought she'd lost forever. Richard remained a friend, a supporter, a mentor, nothing more, nothing less. And that was enough. Because what connected them wasn't romance. It was respect, the kind built through truth. 3 years later, Clara walked across a graduation stage. Thousands of people filled the auditorium. Families cheered. Cameras flashed. And sitting in the front row was a little girl wearing a butterfly-shaped hair clip. Lily. The moment Clara received her nursing degree, Lily jumped to her feet. "Mama!" The entire section laughed. Clara laughed too. And cried. Because she had done it. Against all odds. Against every setback. Against every person who underestimated her. She had done it. After the ceremony, Clara knelt beside Lily. "Do you remember the butterfly you drew?" Lily nodded proudly. "The pretty one." Clara smiled. "That butterfly changed our lives." The little girl frowned. "How?" Clara kissed her forehead. "Because while everyone else was looking at diamonds." She wiped away a tear. "You were looking at the truth." And that's the lesson this story leaves us with. Not every hero wears a cape. Not every hero is rich. Not every hero is powerful. Sometimes a hero is a tired single mother who refuses to stop fighting. And sometimes, a hero is a 3-year-old little girl brave enough to tell the truth, even when nobody else can see it. Because in the end, truth doesn't need the loudest voice. It only needs the courage to be spoken. Before you go, remember this. Never judge someone by their job, their clothes, or their circumstances. The richest person in the room isn't always the one with the most money. Sometimes, it's the person with the strongest character. Clara had every reason to become bitter, but she chose kindness. She had every reason to give up, but she kept going. And when her reputation was attacked, the truth eventually spoke louder than the lies. Because no matter how powerful a lie may seem in the moment, the truth always finds a way to come to light. And sometimes, it comes from the most unexpected voice of all. Now I want to hear from you. If you were Richard Harrison, what would you have done after discovering that Vanessa framed Clara? Would you have forgiven Vanessa, or would you have ended the relationship immediately? Or what part stayed with you? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful story. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.